Hi everyone, I'm Eric. In this episode, we're going to ferment collard greens. As many of you know, collard greens are especially prominent in American southern cuisine. Its thick and hearty leaves lend itself well to withstanding long cooking times. The well-made southern collard greens dish has just the right tenderness and has this tanginess that comes from both the vegetable itself and the cider vinegar. And it's that combination of texture and flavor that reminds me of another very traditional way of preparing greens half a globe apart. In Asia, there's a type of mustard leaves that is commonly fermented and preserved and used in broth, meat dishes, and many others. In Hakka cuisine, the fermented product is sometimes also sun-dried, which makes it possible to store for many years at room temperature. When cooked, the tanginess comes from lactic acid, which is a byproduct of lactofermentation, which means the fermentation involves lactic acid bacteria which naturally exist in our surroundings. When it comes to lactofermentation, I've become a big fan of the vacuum seal method. I learned it from those chefs from this restaurant in Denmark called Noma, and they wrote a book about fermenting all sorts of things. So we know with a traditional method, you need to submerge whatever you're fermenting in a briny or sugary solution, and you need to put some sort of weight on top of it to press it down so it doesn't float atop and come in contact with air. Otherwise, you risk having mold grow on it. But in order to have enough liquid to fully cover the food, you usually end up having to use more water and therefore more salt, and that tends to dilute the flavor of the food somewhat. On the other hand, there are many advantages of using a vacuum bag. With most plants, 80 to 90% of its weight is actually just water. And that water is going to be drawn out by the added salt or sugar, and that creates enough brine to be distributed evenly when the bag gets compressed by vacuum. So that means you normally don't need to add any extra water, and that keeps the flavors more concentrated. So after rinsing the leaves and making sure there's no dirt or bugs on the surface, we dry the leaves until they are slightly wilted. This reduces the risk of water contamination, but more importantly, it makes it easier for salt to penetrate. Now, salt is added during lactofermentation mostly to prevent growth of harmful bacteria, and in a vacuum-sealed environment, which is anaerobic, we need to be extra careful about the growth of botulism. Fortunately, the bacteria that cause botulism do not thrive in a salty environment. Since with the vacuum bag method, we're not adding extra water at all, we can afford to use a lot less salt to achieve a safe salinity level. And that's great because unlike conventional lactoferments, you don't need to wash up extra salt before cooking with it, and that keeps all the flavors intact and just saves a lot of preparation time. I think at Noma they use 2% of salt by the weight of the food to be fermented. So with all that being said, all we need to do is vacuum seal the collard greens with salt and just leave it alone. Now with certain fruits or vegetables, we start to see the effect of salt much more quickly. But collard greens have really thick and waxy leaves, so it's going to take a few hours. When salt finally works its way in, osmosis will automatically draw out more water to dissolve more salt, which in turn draws out more water until everything reaches an equilibrium. So we just kind of leave it alone, and there's no need to worry about mold growth or pressing things down. You can see that the leaves have started to turn yellow after 3 days. We know it's ready when the leaves turn to an olive color and that the stems become almost translucent. Let's see how long it takes. Okay, so it's been about a month since they were packed. You can see that the stems are soft but not mushy at all, and has a very pleasant plum-like aroma that's reminiscent of a really fine burgundy wine. Now we can just take this and cook with it, but the Hakka people take it a step further by drying and aging it. Drying further intensifies the flavor and makes it possible to store and age for years. We're gonna do the same with collard greens. So after aging for 4 months, the flavors have really matured. It smells very deep. It's sweet, a bit resiny, but still remains some of the characteristic cabbage smell. Now we're going to steam it with pork belly. What we're making today is actually classic Hakka dish, but we're using collard greens instead of Asian mustard greens. First, we need to rehydrate the leaves by soaking them in water for a couple hours. In the meantime, we're going to get a nice lap of pork belly and pre-cook it. First, we'll heat up a wok until it's smoking hot. And then, without adding any oil, rub the skin side against the wok to torch off any stray strands of hair. This is pasture-raised Berkshire pork from a small farm in upstate New York, so it tends to have some hair left on the skin, but it's some of the best tasting pork you can get in New York. And it's taken us 5 months to make fermented cabbage, so we should treat every ingredient with the same level of respect. Then we heat up a pot of water and simmer the pork belly for about half an hour. This will soften the skin. While that's going, we're going to mix some maltose with water and a bit of cider vinegar. This is sort of the basic formula for making a glaze for any sort of crispy skin, but since we're not making Peking duck today, it's okay to use any kind of sugar and vinegar you have on hand to promote caramelization. Now before brushing the glaze over the skin, we pierce the skin with a needle all over the place so we can absorb more of the glaze. The holes will also make it much easier for steam to escape when we deep fry it later. Without the holes, we'll get a lot more splatter and explosion from pent-up steam that bursts out of the skin, and we don't want that. Now we brush a dash of soy sauce over the skin, and then the glaze. Or you could just dunk it to the bottom of the bowl and have it soak up the mixture. It's probably easier that way. Then we're going to deep fry it to give it a nice color. Once the oil reaches frying temperature, carefully place the pork belly skin side down into the oil and leave it undisturbed for a couple minutes. It's going to stick to the wok until it's ready to be picked up, so don't force it. And don't worry too much about browning all sides of the pork belly. We just want to brown the skin part. It's done when the skin turns to a nice golden brown color. Now, soak the skin side in water until it's softened. Then cut it into slices about ½ an inch thick. And we're going to make the braising base. Dice up some garlic, 5 spice powder, and use the best soy sauce you can find and combine roughly. Now the pork is going to be steamed in the bowl and then transferred into a serving plate by inverting the bowl. So we're going to steam it skin side down. Finally, we take the rehydrated collard greens and cut it into small pieces. We saute it with a bit of oil until it's fragrant. You can incorporate some of the brine from soaking earlier. And then cover the pork with it. Now steam for at least 2.5 hours, or until the pork belly is very tender that it gives very little resistance when you stick your chopstick through it. Usually this dish is served with some garnishing steamed vegetables. Bok choy is usually a good choice for garnish. There's nothing complicated here, just steam for 1 minute and it's good to go. The last step is to make the sauce from a cooking liquid. To transfer the liquid out of the bowl without disturbing the solids, sandwich the bowl between 2 plates and slowly pour out the liquid. I'm going to thicken this liquid, but I want to do this last right before serving so it's still hot. So I'm going to arrange the bok choy first so everything is ready when the sauce is done. To thicken the sauce, mix some potato starch for thickening with water. Heat up the liquid until it's boiling. The liquid contains fat that's been rendered out during steaming, so be sure to stir vigorously to help emulsify it. When thickening the sauce, add a little bit of starchy water at a time so we don't end up over thickening it. We want it to be kind of silky but not too heavy. Okay, this looks about right. To serve, put a serving plate over it and invert it. Remove the bowl. Drizzle the sauce over it. And there you have it. East meets West, technology meets tradition. I present you my fermented collard greens with pork belly. Buon appetito!